Steal away, steal away, steal away to Jesus. Steal away home. I ain't got long to stay here.
Lincoln won 180 out of 303 Electoral College votes, making him the clear winner. To do that, he had to sweep the free states of the North. The Southern states were outraged. Not a single ballot had been cast for Abraham Lincoln in 10 Southern states because he was not on the ballot, and yet now he was president. South Carolina moved first, seceding from the Union on December 20th, 1860. They cited Lincoln's election as an overt act of aggression by the North. That is, they did not claim to be seceding because they had been attacked, or because the federal government was attempting to divest them of their slaves, but because the result of the presidential election was itself an offense. Within a few months, Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas had joined them. These states adopted a new constitution in February 1861 and declared themselves the Confederate States of America. Jefferson Davis of Mississippi was appointed president by the delegates, and Alexander Stephens of Georgia was appointed vice president. The federal government did not immediately react to the secessions. Lincoln had not even taken office before they had written their new constitution. But soon came an action they could not ignore. Jefferson Davis ordered Confederate forces to capture Fort Sumter, which sat in Charleston Harbor. The attack, which began on April 12th, ended on April 14th, 1861, when the badly outnumbered Union force at Sumter surrendered. The war had begun. Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas all seceded from the Union and joined the Confederacy. In the early stages of the war, relatively few Northerners saw their goal as freeing the slaves. The Northern armies fought to preserve the Union, not to end slavery. But individuals took steps early on that moved the Union closer to emancipation. General Benjamin Butler in Virginia, May 1861, made the decision that he would not return fugitive slaves to their Southern masters. Those states, he argued, could not secede from the Union and then demand that their rights to human property, under the fugitive slave law, be protected by the federal government. Butler declared that these slaves were contraband of war and put them to work for the Union forces. He did not arm them, but every job completed by a contraband freed a white soldier to fight. And within a few months, he had almost 1,000 contrabands. Harriet Tubman, the famed conductor of the Underground Railroad, joined General Butler's forces to help organize and care for the contrabands. General John Fremont, Union commander in the West, declared martial law in the state of Missouri and announced that all slaves owned by Confederates in the state were now freed. Though abolitionists celebrated Fremont's move, Lincoln felt that it risked losing the support of the slave-owning border states, which had so far remained with the Union. He directed Fremont and other generals to only confiscate slaves performing services directly to the Confederacy. But many Northern soldiers had difficulty with that order and would declare that slaves that came to them had been providing services to the Confederacy when it might not have been strictly true. Slaves in the South at times had the experience of seeing Union armies marching past to do battle against armies that might include the slaves' masters or masters' sons. Jasper Battle of Georgia described a different experience.
During the big war, all the white folks was all for fighting, except them that was too old to fight or was too bad crippled and afflicted. They stayed home and looked after the women's and the children's. Somebody sent Mrs. word that them Yankees was on the way to our plantation. She done hid everything she could. Them had the hogs and horses drive off to the swamps and hid. Them Yankees was polite like, and they bothered nothing on our place, but they just plumb ruined everything on the plantation right close to ourn. They took nigh everything some of our neighbors had to eat, most all their good horses and everything else they wanted.
In the North, abolitionist pressure was building for a general emancipation of all slaves. Again, Lincoln feared what this would do to the support of the border states. On multiple occasions, he met with delegates from these states in an attempt to get them to accept some process of gradual emancipation, whereby the federal government would financially reimburse slave owners for their loss of property. But the offer was flatly refused. Congress was able to force the issue in the District of Columbia. In April 1862, about a year after the war began, Congress abolished slavery in the district and compensated former slave owners with payments of $300 per slave. It was the beginning of emancipation in America. Even in the North, there was resistance to the idea of large numbers of free blacks intermingling with whites. White workers feared the competition they might face, competing against workers whose experience was to labor without pay. Racist fears dovetailed with economic ones, as foes of emancipation warned of black men taking up with the daughters of white men. Anti-slavery forces resisted this backlash and stressed that emancipation would help the war effort. Lincoln, as ever, sought to preserve the Union. As he said,
"My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or to destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that."
On September 22, 1862, Lincoln issued a proclamation that achieved that last option, freeing, in name, the overwhelming majority of slaves while leaving the others alone. The Emancipation Proclamation, taking advantage of the war powers granted to the Commander-in-Chief, declared that all slaves living in states that were in rebellion as of January 1st, 1863, would be free. Slaves living in the border states of Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri were not included in Lincoln's proclamation, nor were those living in Confederate states, but within areas controlled by the Union. But this still meant that over 3 million slaves had been freed under the law by the stroke of a pen. Lincoln said at the time,
"I never in my life felt more certain that I was doing right than I do in signing this paper."
But for now, these slaves were free in name only. It would take years of war and unimaginable carnage to make them free in fact. That carnage would be borne by the nation as a whole, and blacks would be part of it. The Emancipation Proclamation paved the way for the recruitment of black troops, so that, to paraphrase Frederick Douglass, those who would be free could strike their own blow. Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, and other leaders in the black community would help recruit regiments of black troops who would prove that they could fight bleed, and die as well as any white soldier. Death and destruction on a scale previously unknown to the country lay ahead. But the slaves of America were now reaching for the final rung on the ladder up from slavery.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.